The UN Security Council is set to hold an emergency meeting later today. Bob Rae is Canada's ambassador to the UN. Ambassador Rae, good morning to you.
Good morning, Rosemary.
I guess I just want your reaction as someone who has watched and knows an awful lot about the Middle East, your reaction to what we saw unfold in the past 36 hours.
Well, I think it's horrendous. I think the impacts are going to be very, very substantial, very huge. I think I'm afraid, I fear for a much further loss of life. I think that's something that preoccupies me a whole lot. And I think potentially a widening of the war to the north to Hezbollah. So far, the West Bank has been relatively calm, but lots of ways in which that can also create tremendous problems. The hostage situation is deeply troubling. Hamas is supposed to announce today how many hostages it has. That will affect the overall conduct of the war. It's an enormously serious situation.
Yeah, and devastating losses in Israel, I think in a way that they certainly didn't expect, but also that they haven't seen in some time. From a historical perspective, Ambassador Rae, what should people make of the size of this attack?
Well, the previous major wars that Israel has been involved in, I mean, they've been the wars with other states. That was the War of Independence in 1948. Suez was a contained war, but short, but not a great result for Israel. 67 was obviously the war in which Israel was attacked from all sides, but came out with a substantial increase of its geographic control. But that came with a double-edged sword. They then had to figure out, well, what do we do with these territories that are now occupied? And that's been there ever since. 73, the Yom Kippur War, most serious surprise attack. And then you've had the Intifada over a long period of time, which between the Israelis and the Palestinians, which is now the worst case of a conflict directly between the Palestinian leadership of Hamas and Israelis, in which it would now appear that at least 600 Israelis have been killed, most of them civilians. So it's a terrible attack, terrible trauma for the country, terrible loss, and all of us, many of us in Canada have friends and family in Israel. Sure. We're all watching this from a very personal perspective. It's a terrible tragedy.
Obviously, we saw most of the world condemn yesterday the actions of Hamas. What do you think, what can we expect to see in terms of response? Obviously, where you are in the U.S., that they are sort of the major player in this, but also from Canada.
Well, I think from a Canadian standpoint, our objective is obviously to state clearly what the law is. This is a terrorist attack without any justification. We can all talk about the context of the war, but that really doesn't explain the violence and the cruelty of what took place. We need to understand that it's going to produce a very strong reaction from Israel. That response has to be compatible with the law of engagement, the law of war, which requires all the rules about proportionality and everything else, and it can't be directed or motivated by cruelty for Israel's own sake. Mm-hmm. But it's still going to be a very violent conflict. I mean, Israel has to deal with the fact that a terrorist attack was launched from Gaza, which is a very small strip of land right next to Israel. And that is going to create a very different response from Israel than we've ever seen before. This is going to be a major reckoning of what's taken place. Unfortunately, for everyone, we need to understand something else, and that is that two peoples claiming rights to the same land, two peoples that have been living and fighting side by side for a very, very long time, are going to have to figure out a way to put an end to the conflict. And the way to end the conflict will not only be violence or superior firepower, because that only buys you some time. It doesn't buy you peace. And that peace still requires a negotiation, and that still requires a recognition of the rights of the other side. And that's fundamentally and foundational to the establishment of peace.
There's this UN Security Council meeting later today. I wonder what you would expect to see on the diplomatic front from different countries about trying to make sure it doesn't escalate and go into other countries and just get much worse than what we're dealing with here.
I think there will be a lot of, first of all, the debate will be held behind closed doors. It will not be a public discussion. It will, I think, give some parties an opportunity to vent, but not always the most helpful thing, but venting needs to happen. There already are a number of countries in the region, outside the region, that are going to be heavily involved in trying to figure out how to create the conditions for less loss of life and less conflict. But as I said before, Israel has indicated that it's in a state of war with Hamas. Hamas, the way it has acted, has stated that it's in a state of war with Israel. And getting to a conclusion of that is going to be very, very tough. But it doesn't mean you don't stop trying. You keep your ears open. We're in New York. There's a lot of conversations underway about what might or could be done. But I think it's pretty clear at this very moment today, this is not a moment where you're going to see anything happen except a drawing of lines in the sand and clearly a preparation for a very serious conflict. And we all strive for the moment when there can be a breakthrough, but I don't think it's going to come quickly.
Ambassador Ray, I so appreciate you making the time this morning. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Good to talk to you. Thanks so much.